how you doing? Happy Tuesday. I am back from the big island of Hawaii. And you know, it's funny. I was never a huge fan of Hawaii. Don't get mad. My brother lives there, people in Hawaii. I love it. But like Maui, the first time I went, I'm very blessed to have traveled a lot. Travel is very important to me. And you might say travel is my crack. I love it. I'm addicted. I love traveling. I also have a very busy, insane life. I really do. And I need the break. I need a lot of breaks. But first time I went to Maui, I was like, I don't get it. Why does everybody love it so much? And second time I went, like when I liked it more. Third time I went, liked it more. Kauai. First time I went, I was like, why does everybody like it so much? Second time I went, liked it more. I think I've only been there twice. I've been to Oahu many times because my brother lives there in Honolulu and has for over 20 years. So I used to go visit him once a year. And I've never been to the Big Island. I went to the Big Island. I really didn't think I was going to like it, but I loved it. I loved it. And it wasn't the, black lava and stuff. But I did two things that were on my bucket list. So I just wanted to share. I did the night dive with the manta rays. And it was so incredible. I cried in my snorkel under the water because I couldn't believe this beautiful creature, was touching me. I mean, he was doing flips and he's, touching me right there in the water. It was awesome. And I volcanoed. I did a helicopter ride with my husband, two kids, my brother and his wife over an active volcano that erupted right in 2018 and in 2020. That was pretty. That was pretty cool. So two things off my bucket list. Check. COVID took 2 years away from getting through that bucket list. But anyway, I'm back. I don't know if I'm refreshed. It's Tuesday and I'm already stressed and need another vacation. But let's talk about what's in the news, and that can be stressful, as you know. Let's kick it and check what's ripped from those. The FBI's unprecedented, I keep saying that, search of former President Donald Trump's Florida residence ricocheted around government, politics, and a polarized nation today, along with questions as to why the Justice Department, notably cautious under Attorney General Merrick Garland, decided to take such a drastic step. Well, answers weren't quickly forthcoming. Agents yesterday searched Trump's Mar-A-Lago estate. It's also a private club. It was part of a federal investigation into whether the former president took classified records from the White House to his Florida residence, which, by the way, is against the law. It marked a dramatic escalation of law enforcement scrutiny of the former president. He currently faces an array of inquiries tied to his conduct in the waning days of his administration. Now, from echoes of Watergate to the more immediate House probe of the January 6th Capitol insurrection, Washington, a city it's used to August being pretty sleepy, reeled from one speculative or accusatory headline to the next. Was the Justice Department politicized? I'm going to tell you no, and here's why. Okay. I said it's not political, and one of these right wingers posted it. Thank you, by the way, for the post, for the retweets, for the number of people that followed me as a result of that, and for spelling my name right. Thank you. I think it's Bridget or Brigitte Gabriel or whatever her name. And that's not her real name. Somebody told me it's not her real name at all. We'll get to that another time. Anyway, everybody thinks Leslie Marshall's crazy for saying this is not political. I'm not going to tell you why it's not political. Because Donald Trump did not look like, we all know he's going to run. We all know he's going to announce it. His ego won't let him not do it, right? I mean, he's a narcissist. Let's be honest. But we don't all know that he would get the nomination. Because when you look at polls, more and more people, even people who voted for him, are like, been there, done that, had enough, don't want it again, don't want to go back to that. And some of his base, maybe because of January 6th, the air had been let out of their sails. And Ron DeSantis really, I think, was the guy to watch, and is the guy to watch, perhaps, to become the GOP nominee, unless he keeps his head so far up Trump's tushy there that he becomes the VP. Yeah, I guess you get to decide. Do you want to be number one or you want him to be number two? And when you look at what's happened in the past 24 hours, Trump's name is all over the media again. Trump's base is riled up. If anything, this raid helped former President Trump. So if this was politicized, if this was for political gain, it backfired. Completely backfired. This isn't going to stop Donald Trump from running again necessarily. I don't think anything could. But I do think this has helped him, given him a bump popularity-wise in the polls and riled up his base even more, especially those that were kind of like over it or had chilled out. This has made them angry, put a match under their butts, right? So it's not political, because if it is, it's the stupidest political mistake, because it's helping the person that you want to politically oppose and take down politically, right? So was the Department of Justice politicized? What prompted it to seek authorization to search the estate for classified documents? And now, months after it was revealed that Donald Trump had taken boxes of materials with him when he left the White House after losing the election. Now, the Attorney General, Merrick Garland, has not tipped his hand despite the outcry from some Democrats who are impatient over whether the department was even pursuing evidence that has surfaced in the January 6th probe and other investigations. And then from Republicans on the other side, who were swift to echo Trump's claims that he was the victim of political prosecution. And can I do a sidebar here? Senator Rick Scott, I hope you or some of your cronies are listening to me. This is nothing like Nazis invading people's homes. You said it on Twitter, on television, on the network I work on, Fox News. You said it on Twitter. I said on Twitter, and I'm saying it here. The Nazis went into the homes of Jewish people, took them and their children and their belongings and their home, put them on trains to concentration camps like Auschwitz, which were death camps, and they were murdered and then burned in ovens, some of them burned alive, who were not fully dead after they tried to gas them in fake showers. This is nothing like the Nazis. Nothing. Please stop comparing Nazis and the Holocaust to people like myself that lost family in the Holocaust and to the victims' families of those murders. It's just abominable. You're pissing on the graves of people who suffered horrendous evil at the hands of men in SS uniforms. That is just a sidebar there. Anyway, what the Attorney General Garland has said publicly is that, quote, no one is above the law. No one is above the law. Hello, no one is above the law. Do you remember, Richard Nixon, Republicans didn't say, no, he didn't do it. What did they do? They sit down and had a come to Jesus moment, and they're like, we think you should resign. You got to get impeached, and you're going to be removed. It's going to look better for you and the party if you go bye-bye now. And, even though some Republicans came out on January 6th and they said, this is terrible, this is horrendous, they're singing a different tune now. Those that said Donald Trump was terrible and horrendous, they're singing a different tune now. This party has changed, and not for the good. FBI agents descended on Trump's shuttered-for-the-season home. He was in New York. He wasn't there. He was thousands of miles or so away, and they had search warrants. So this wasn't, people are like, it was a raid. It was early in the morning. Nobody was notified. Hey, it's not a raid if you're notified, because then you can flush the evidence down the toilet, which we know the former president has a habit of doing. Now, the search yesterday intensified the months-long probe into how classified documents ended up in boxes of White House records located at Mar-a-Lago earlier this year. A separate grand jury is investigating efforts to overturn the results of the 2020 presidential election, and it all adds potential legal peril for Donald Trump as he lays the groundwork for a potential repeat run for the White House, as he keeps teasing, right? Familiar battle lines forged during a 4-year presidency shadowed by investigations quickly took shape again. Trump and his allies sought to cast the search as weaponization of the criminal justice system, playing the victim, right? Playing the victim. You have Marjorie Taylor Greene saying, defund the FBI. Isn't the FBI law enforcement? Wouldn't that be like defund the police? I digress again. We're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to continue with more with rips from the headlines and more about this Trump raid at Mar-a-Lago, why it was done, what they were looking for. And of course, a lot of people are saying, why now? We'll talk about it right after this. Don't go away. I'm Leslie Marshall.
If you miss Leslie on TV this week, catch up at lesliemarshallshow.com. Follow Leslie on Twitter. Just go to www.twitter.com/Leslie Marshall, and we'll be sure to share your tweets.
I want to get back to seeing my grandbabies every Sunday and smothering them with big hugs and kisses.
I want to get back to football games with my boys I want to get back to feeling and touching, connecting with the people around me.
I want to get back to family dinners and my grandma's mac and cheese.
I want to get back to real grocery shopping, taking my time, walking down every aisle, smelling the tomatoes and melons, having a free sample or two, or three.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. But now, there are vaccines. And they are the first step that let us get back to feeling optimistic about the days ahead of us. It's okay to have questions.
Is it safe?
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Now, get the facts. Learn more at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Hey sis, missed you this morning. Kim told me you weren't feeling well, so I'm just doing a self-care check.
Oh, thank you, friend.
How you doing?
Girl, listen, my energy was so low because I didn't eat breakfast when I got up, so I had to miss virtual yoga with y'all.
Trust me, I understand.
But I'm doing much better now that I've eaten, so I'm back on track.
Great. In that case, let's get some steps in tonight. I'll come over and we can walk around the lake.
Sounds good. Appreciate you being in my business, too. Now, let me get in yours. Did you check your blood pressure today?
I did that and my squats, okay?
Okay.
High blood pressure is not going to be my friend if I can help it. See you at 6?
Let's get it. See you then.
Now more than ever, it's important that we protect our hearts and the hearts of those we love. Check in on one another and be a part of a healthy blood pressure movement. Rally your squad to take the online pledge at releasethepressure.org. Brought to you by the Release the Pressure Coalition and the Ad Council.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1965. That was the day 53 construction tradesmen were killed in a fire at the Titan II ICBM launch complex near Searcy, Arkansas. It is considered one of the worst industrial accidents at a U.S. nuclear weapons facility. The complex was one of 4 sites containing Titan II missiles. Each missile weighed 340,000 pounds, measuring 103 feet in length and 10 feet in diameter. President Johnson had just committed more troops to the Vietnam War. The Air Force had hoped to strengthen the silo against a possible Soviet attack. They had contracted with Peter Kiewit and Son of Colorado to bring in electricians, carpenters, millwrights, painters, and pipe fitters for a number of tasks. Crews worked to shore up the silo, improve the blast doors, adjust hydraulics, and install emergency lighting. 52 of the 55 workers on all 9 levels of the silo were almost immediately asphyxiated when it suddenly filled with smoke and heat. The Air Force determined a welder on level 2 had accidentally pierced a high-pressure hydraulic line, igniting the fire. Investigators also concluded that the silo lacked adequate ventilation, alternative exits, and independent power sources. The contractor was held responsible for numerous safety violations, contributing to unsafe work conditions. The welder was found drowned in hydraulic fluid. 2 survivors suffered burns and smoke inhalation. They contested the Air Force's findings. One worker insisted no one had been welding on level 2. The other survivor stated he saw flames burst from the diesel engine just before the power went out. Both men insisted the fire started from below. By 1981, 2 more deadly accidents involving Titan II missiles would prompt President Reagan to order their deactivation. Like what you hear? Check out more at laborhistoryin2.com.
We are back on Leslie Marshall. Welcome back to the only true democracy in talk. And we go back to what is ripped from the headlines, talking about the raid at Mar-A-Lago, that took place yesterday. And a lot of people, they're talking all over the place, right? The Democrats are, using this as a weapon, trying to keep them from winning another term in 2024. The Biden White House, by the way, said it had no prior knowledge. Current FBI Director Christopher Wray, a lifelong Republican and a Trump appointee from 5 years ago, also also agrees, concurs with the president, and that the FBI did not give the White House a heads up. Trump, disclosing the search in a lengthy statement yesterday, asserted the agents opened a safe at his home. He described the work as unannounced raid. Raids are unannounced. He said it was prosecutorial misconduct. They had a warrant. By the way, the warrant was signed by somebody who has done a lot of stuff and worked for an attorney for Jeffrey Epstein, who was a friend of Donald Trump. Justice Department spokesperson Dina Iverson declined to comment on the search, including whether the Attorney General had personally authorized it. About 24 Trump supporters stood in protest mid-morning in the Florida summer heat and sporadic light rain on a bridge near the former president's residence. One had a sign that read, "Democrats are fascist." Others carried flags saying 2020 was rigged, Trump 2024. Biden's name with an obscenity. Sometimes cars would honk when they passed by. The former Vice President Mike Pence, despite the fact that his former employer, Donald Trump, the president at the time, didn't have a problem with people looking to hang him at the gallows, and also a potential rival for Trump, tweeted, quote, yesterday's action undermines public confidence in a system of justice, and Attorney General Garland must give a full accounting to the American people as to why this action was taken. He must do so immediately. I wouldn't totally disagree with that. I think people do distrust law enforcement, especially on the right, if they're the ones being looked at. U.S. Senator Lindsey Graham said he spoke with Trump today, felt even more strongly after the search that Trump will run in 2024. Where you been, Lindsey? We all know that. He said, I believed he was going to run before. I'm stronger in my belief now. And Trump was planning to meet today at his Bedminster, New Jersey club with members of the Republican Study Committee. That group's headed by Jim Banks from Indiana, and they say it's committed to putting forth his priorities in Congress. The FBI reached out to the Secret Service shortly before serving that warrant. Secret Service agents contacted the Justice Department. They were able to validate the warrant before facilitating access to the estate. So in other words, all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed. By the way, the Justice Department has been investigating the potential mishandling of classified information since the National Archives and Records Administration said it received from Mar-a-Lago 15 boxes of White House records, including documents containing classified information. And that was earlier this year. The National Archives said the former president should have turned the material over upon leaving office. It asked the Justice Department to investigate, not Democrats. There are multiple federal laws governing the handle of classified records and sensitive government documents, including statutes that make it a crime to remove such material and to retain it in an unauthorized location. Though a search warrant does not necessarily mean criminal charges are near or even expected, federal officials looking to obtain one must first demonstrate to a judge that they have probable cause that a crime occurred. Now, two people familiar with the matter have said the search was related to the records probe. Agents were also looking to see if Trump had additional presidential records or any classified documents at the estate. Why? Because they're not to be kept there. They're classified. They're to be locked up, and it's illegal. Trump previously maintained that presidential records were turned over, quote, in an ordinary and routine process. His son Eric said on Fox News last night he spent the day with his father and that the search happened because the National Archives wanted to corroborate whether or not the former president had any documents in his possession. That doesn't sound as nefarious as his father's trying to make it out to be. It certainly doesn't point a finger at Democrats or political motivation. Asked how the documents ended up at Mar-a-Lago, Eric Trump said the boxes were among items that got moved out of the White House during 6 hours on Inauguration Day when the Bidens prepared to move into the building, when they were not greeted and the doors were locked, if you recall. He said, my father always kept press clippings. He had boxes when he moved out of the White House. Trump himself, in a social media post last night, called the search a weaponization of the justice system, an attack by radical left Democrats who desperately don't want me to run for president in 2024. No, I do want you to run for president. I want the circus on your side of the aisle to continue. I want us to have one candidate on the left we're all focused on and getting stuff done for the best interest of the American people, this nation, and moving forward, progressing, because we're progressives. But on the right, we want you and Mike Pence and Governor DeSantis and others to tear each other apart because you guys do that so well. Let's rip another. Good news. President Biden today signed a $280 billion package that aims to boost the domestic chip-making industry and scientific research. Fundamental change is taking place today, politically, economically, and technologically. That's what the president said before signing the Chips and Science Act. Quote, change that can either strengthen our sense of control and security of dignity and pride in our lives and our nation, or change that can weaken us. This is the moment we face, he added. Today is the day for builders. Today, America is delivering. Today, I am signing the law, the CHIPS and Science Act, a once-in-a-generation investment in America itself, a law the American people can be proud of. Now, why does this matter? The funding is meant to bolster the domestic production of semiconductors. That's a vital component for almost every electronic device that's in use today, not just here, but throughout the world. And it helps prevent future supply chain crises and helps us increase competition with China. The bill passed Congress late July, had bipartisan support, $52.7 billion in funding for U.S. semiconductor production, by this way, is jobs creator, and another $200 billion for scientific research, including a technology directorate at the National Science Foundation. And that's meant to translate basic research into commercial products. Jobs, jobs, jobs. Let's rip it. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals ruled today that the House Ways and Means Committee can obtain former President Trump's tax returns from the IRS. Trump's been fighting the release of his tax returns to the committee for more than 3 years. And the Ways Committee said, we expect to receive the requested tax return and audit files immediately. Yes, but Trump can and likely will appeal the ruling, meaning the litigation over the documents will continue, and that drags on. The big picture here is the committee in its 2021 request to the IRS for the records, by the way, so this is over a year old now, says it plans to use them to assess the service's presidential audit program, though Trump and his lawyers argue the committee wants to publish them. The ruling stems from a lawsuit in 2019. That would be 3 years ago, right? A file by the House and Ways Means Chair Richard Neal, Democrat from Mass, to obtain a court order against the IRS to turn over the tax returns. Let's rip another. And an Atlanta judge ordered Rudy Giuliani to testify in person before a panel investigating the 2020 election on August 17th, unless a doctor can explain why he is unable to do so. Giuliani is among those closest to former President Trump that the Fulton County Special Purpose Grand Jury has subpoenaed. He was originally ordered to testify today. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney granted Giuliani about a week of additional time to travel to Atlanta after a doctor argued Giuliani could not travel by airplane following a recent cardiac procedure to implant stents. McBurney suggested Giuliani break into a few days a car trip to Atlanta to make it more doable over the next week. This of note, the judge granted Giuliani's legal and medical team the opportunity to argue in detail why he needs additional time before making the trip to Atlanta. Giuliani's lawyers first attempted to shift his testimony to Zoom and also suggested the district attorney's staff travel to New York to interview him. However, the DA's office maintained he must testify in person before a special purpose grand jury focused on that wide-ranging probe. Well, that's what's ripped from the headlines. We're coming up. Great guest. I hope you'll stick around for that. We're going to be talking about climate change and some other things in a moment, right here on the only true democracy in talk radio. Don't go away.
Hey, Dad, how do airplanes fly? What's in this box? Can I touch this? Where does sand come from? Is this tree good for climbing? What happens if I mix these two things together? How are babies made? What does this thing do?
Kids are curious about everything, including guns. Talking to them about gun safety in your home is a good first step, but you can do more. Always keep your guns locked, unloaded, and stored separately from ammunition. Storing your guns securely is the best way to prevent family fire, including unintentional shootings. For more information on safe gun storage and ways to keep your family safe, visit endfamilyfire.org. That's endfamilyfire.org.
What do we keep in the attic? What's this thing called? Can I ride my bike backwards?
Like I said, kids are curious. It's up to us to keep them safe. Brought to you by End Family Fire, Brady, and the Ad Council.
Right now, our country feels divided, but there's a place where people are coming together.
I gotta tell you, I was nervous to talk to someone so different than me.
Me too, but I'm glad we are.
Love Has No Labels and One Small Step are helping people with different political views, beliefs, and life experiences come together through conversation, and it feels good.
Wow, your story is so...
Interesting?
Yeah.
When people actually sit down, talk, and listen to one another, they can break down boundaries and connect as human beings. At lovehasnolabels.com/onesmallstep, you can listen to amazing, life-changing conversations and find simple tools to start a conversation of your own.
I know one thing. This conversation gives me hope.
It gives me a lot.
Although we haven't even gotten through this year's midterm congressional elections, it's still not too early to start examining some of the characters who hope you will make them president in 2024. I know you don't want to, but we must. That's because corporate elites have already chosen their favorites, and they intend to use massive sums of money, lies, more money, PR slickum, and even more money to slide their toady into the Oval Office, hoping you don't discover until it's too late that their chosen one really is a toad. Take Ron DeSantis. The GOP's far-right, power-hungry, narcissistic Florida governor promises to be the next Donald Trump, only more effective and not as nice. For example, his favorite gubernatorial hobby is the Orwellian practice of monitoring and censoring people's speech and thoughts, culling out ideas he deems objectionable. Don't say gay is his most infamous dictate to the state's teachers, but he has also outlawed any teachings that might, quote, denigrate the Founding Fathers. Nor will he tolerate the study of institutional racism in America. Indeed, he has even mandated that social studies textbooks, get this, must not include concepts of social justice. Ron adamantly opposes what right-wingers call a woke society. He wants one that's asleep, sound asleep. He recently rallied his right-wing cadre to ban some math textbooks. Yes, math. They screeched that some real-life topics like wage disparities are being used to make math problems relevant to today's students. So it was Fahrenheit 451 for those books. Thus far, DeSantis' censorship binge has nixed 42 math books for, quote, incorporating prohibited topics. This is Jim Hightower saying, did I mention that DeSantis is also forming his own gubernatorial military force? A state army he can deploy in emergencies. What's an emergency? He says he'll decide.
We're back. Hey there, I'm Leslie Marshall. Welcome back. Only true democracy and talk. Really glad to have with us today our guest for the second half of the show, Tim Zenk. Tim has worked in renewable energy project development and policy for 2 decades to build new technologies for difficult to decarbonize sectors. Presently, he's the president at Molecule LLC, where he works at the nexus of policy, finance, and technology to fight climate change and support an industrial transformation that is required for the U.S. to remain globally competitive in a zero-carbon future. Now, here in the United States, he represents renewable fuels leader Neste and hydrogen logistics and aviation pioneer Universal Hydrogen, among other clients. He is the founder and executive director of the Washington Green Hydrogen Alliance and Clean Fuel in Washington. He was he's senior executive at Sapphire Energy, a company that invented renewable crude oil, which is green crude, and they did it from algae. Earlier in his career, he served in several government roles in the Clinton-Gore White House, in Congress for Representative Norm Dixon, on the staff of Washington's 19th governor, Gardner. Check him out on Twitter at Green Crude. More than a pleasure to have with us Tim Zenk, who is a crude, I don't want to say crude, but a shrewd guy when it comes to green. And really good to have you with us today. Thank you for joining us.
Really great to be with you today, Leslie.
Tim, this is a perfect timing for us to be talking, and obviously that was intentional. I want to talk about the Inflation Reduction Act. There are a lot of people who are PO'd, myself included, about more IRS agents, but let's look at the bigger picture, okay? There are ways that the Inflation Reduction Act will fight climate change. That's what this is about for the future of our planet, the future of our children. People have to remember there's going to be life here, and we hope there'll be life here, our kids and our kids' kids, long after we're gone. We can't just worry about it when we're here, like I think a lot of folks over on the right do. But let's look at ways, specifically 5, where the Inflation Reduction Act will fight climate change, and maybe you have, some more, right?
Sure.
And there'll be more clean energy, and more clean energy means less dirty energy, right? And there'll also be what some people want to say, new punishments for methane leaks, and billions of dollars for communities most in need of climate-related help. These are all provisions that have celebration among environmentalists and should have a celebration from everyone. First of all, is this a monumental step for U.S. climate action, as some of the environmentalists are claiming?
Yeah, it's approximately 5 times larger than the last time Congress took a look at climate related initiatives during the time when there was the financial failure, where the bank failures resulted in substantial economic downturn, and the Congress stepped in to do some sort of investment in different projects. But this is substantially larger than that effort.
Joe Manchin signed on for this one, and he was opposed to anything, it seemed, with the words climate or change in it. What do your folks tell you made him come around? You know, what because I mean, this was pretty much, a 180.
Well, I think part of it was getting the incentives structured in a way that allowed for the fossil fuel folks to get some things done that they needed to get done. And the deal that was cut was basically, if you want, for every ton of CO2 that is emitted through a fossil fuel industry investment in this bill, 25 tons had to be remediated. And so, it's a really good deal for the environment, and it's an incredible deal for climate change. But it's all about negotiation in these big Senate deals. And I think what really it came down to was getting the detail correct for Senator Manchin.
Yeah, I would agree. The package calls for major spending to tackle the climate crisis, in addition to extending healthcare coverage and reducing the deficit. Now, on top of tax credits to provide incentives, those incentives to purchase electric vehicles or to use clean energy, alternate, energy, sources like solar panels. And let's talk about that for a second, because there are a lot of people out there who say that, middle to lower income families cannot or have not been able to, up until now perhaps, afford an electric vehicle. And we definitely want to move in that direction. We see the world moving in that direction, or at least the more industrialized world. And then, clean energy as well. Do these tax credits provide enough incentive financially for the movement to go with the middle and lower income families to electric vehicles and clean energy sources?
Well, these tax incentives are designed to be bolt-on to other incentives that states offer. For example, the state of Washington has a clean car and a zero-emission vehicle standard that the states have implemented that will assist in the purchase of vehicles, whether new or used. And on top of that, you have now a federal incentive, which are critical. So the key here is buying down the cost of making that transition for zero emission or low emission vehicles, particularly focused on folks who need assistance. So one of the features of this bill that other bills have not had was a cap on income, that so that not everybody is eligible for that tax credit from an electric vehicle standpoint. So really focusing in on the core of the economy that really needs the assistance, stretches your dollars and allows you to really implement this, over sort of the entire economy versus just people buying Teslas. In fact, Teslas, the expensive Tesla won't be eligible for this tax credit. So these are for cars that rank and file people drive.
Interesting. Yes. When the bill also aims to expand renewable energy production, also fund the development of technologies to remove carbon dioxide from the atmosphere. Can you speak a little bit more about that? Because, for some people don't fully understand, what the bill will do specifically regarding these two areas and how.
So the bill is really interesting, and I think one of the features of this tax credit and the assistance that the federal government intends to provide to automakers and those companies that are making technology to go into the consumer marketplace so that people can purchase things and reduce the carbon intensity of their transportation is one of the features that I think is great, which it requires battery makers to be made here in the United States, and it provides incentives for developing an industry around creating our own battery development industry versus leaning on China for some of the for their production assistance. But overall, what these incentives do is they create a disincentive to use fossil fuels. Fossil fuels, for example, coal is more expensive than wind and solar today. Natural gas is more expensive than wind and solar today. And so these incentives essentially allow for the development of these assets and compete with what had been less expensive energy sources and are now more expensive.
The climate portion of this legislation was significantly pared down from the original ambitions that the Biden administration had in the Build Back Better Act. But it would be, this still is, would you agree, the largest investment to address global warming in U.S. history. And so 2 questions here. Does, even with it being pared down, will this still reduce the country's greenhouse gas emissions and make a big enough dent that we're not still pining for the Build Back Better Act?
So the president's initial goal when he addressed the issue of climate change was to reduce carbon emissions by 50% by 2030. This bill does it 40% by 2030, and they believe the analysis shows that there's enough state and federal leeway at the executive branch to get to the rest of the 10%. So it addresses the 50% reduction by 2030 directly, and it will get us there based on all the analysis that we see.
Dan Lashoff, who is the U.S. director of the World Resources Institute, you know him and you know them. They're out of Washington. They're a nonprofit research group. They say that this bill is transformative, and they added that it was the culmination of decades of work to enact meaningful climate legislation. This is what he said in a news briefing. Quote, yesterday, it would be hard to overstate what a pivotal moment this was with the Senate. I'm sure that you would agree with that. Anything you want to add to it?
Yeah, no, there's no question. First of all,
you know what? I didn't realize we're up against a break. Hang on. I'm going to have you answer that on the other side of this break, and we'll talk more about the investments in clean energy that this bill provides and, how fighting climate change is truly a part of this Inflation Reduction Act and how that benefits many of us, especially when it comes to that 4-letter word, jobs. We'll be back with our guest, Tim Zenk, right after this. Follow him on Twitter @GreenCrude. I'm Leslie Marshall. Don't hold.
What I know about courage, I learned from my adoptive mom. She said sometimes you just gotta hold on and know we'll get through this. Mom, we are so high up. Hold my hand.
No, you hold my hand.
Here we go.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more.
I learned patience from my adoptive dad. All he had to say was,
"Hey, you got this. Just breathe." Hey, we're pretty good.
Yeah.
Might have to start a band.
I got it.
Learn about adopting a teen from foster care. You can't imagine the reward. Visit adoptuskids.org to find out more. This message is brought to you by Adopt US Kids, the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, and the Ad Council.
COVID-19 has changed how we live and how we feel. We show up differently, worship differently, and have found new ways to express our love and support to family and friends. But now there are vaccines. And they are the first step that lets us get back into the things we miss most. Like spreading the word without spreading concern. Girls tripping instead of solo sipping. Brunching instead of late night munching. And talking smack with a side of mac and cheese. It's okay to have questions about COVID-19 vaccines.
Should I get it?
Should I wait?
Is it safe?
Can I trust it?
What about pre-existing conditions?
Now get the facts. Visit GetVaccineAnswers.org so you can make an informed decision when COVID-19 vaccines are available to you. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
911, what's your emergency?
America's healthcare system is broken and people are dying.
Welcome to Code Whack, where we shine a light on America's callous healthcare system, how it hurts us, and what we can do about it. I'm your host, Brenda Gazar. This time on Code Whack, why is it that many Americans who have health insurance are still not able to get the care they need? What strategies are health insurers using to increase profits, but which also sometimes drive American families to financial ruin? To find out, we recently spoke to health insurance industry whistleblower and New York Times bestselling author Wendell Potter. Wendell's the former vice president of corporate communications for the health insurance giant Cigna. Today, he's a strong advocate for Medicare for All and is the co-founder of Business Leaders for Healthcare Transformation.
One of the reasons I left Cigna was because I knew that the industry-wide strategy of shifting more and more people into what euphemistically we referred to as consumer-driven health plans would lead to the financial ruin of countless American families. And we're seeing that play out right now. More and more families have insurance, paying a lot of money every month, and in many cases they just simply don't have enough money to spend out of their own pockets what they have to spend before their coverage will kick in. So that was a deliberate strategy, and the industry spent a lot of money on propaganda campaigns to get people like me and many others to say, this is the way we need to do healthcare. They essentially said, let's move people into plans that make them pay more for care before we'll pay anything. And that's what happened.
The full Code Whack story on ProgressiveVoices.com and on the PV app. Catch all our episodes by subscribing to Code Whack wherever you find your podcasts. This podcast is powered by Heal California, a nonprofit that uplifts the voices of those fighting for healthcare reform around the country. Until next time, stay healthy.
And we're back. We're talking with Tim Zenk. Tim has worked with renewable energy project development and policy for decades. He is presently president at Molecule LLC. He is our guest, and he can be found and followed at Twitter at Green Crude. That is his handle. We are talking with him about the Inflation Reduction Act and how it will fight climate change, and and what it will mean. Before the break, I asked you a question, but I do want to ask you, when we talk about investments in clean energy, it's also an investment in the American people and the American economy, isn't it? I mean, won't this be a huge jobs creator?
We need to retool the entire economy so that we can be competitive globally, and we have to do that with the assistance of the U.S. government. That's the way every economic transition has occurred in the past throughout our entire history. And so we need to do the same this time to remain competitive globally against China and other nations who are investing heavily in this area. I mean, in the bill, there's $10 billion for manufacturing facilities for electric vehicles and wind turbines and solar panels. And there's another $30 billion in production tax credit for domestic manufacturing of solar panels, batteries, and things like that. And there's another $20 billion for helping refit and retool manufacturing facilities at Ford Motor Company and a number of other organizations, U.S. manufacturers that create a lot of jobs here in the United States. And so that's what we have to do.
Oh, absolutely. So let's break it down. I mentioned the five, and we don't have tons of time. We talk about huge investments in clean energy. You talked about some consumers eligible for $7,500 tax credits for buying new electric vehicles, $4,000 in credits for used electronic vehicles. So they, took care of that as well. So people can lower their energy cost. And this really is pushing us as a nation to be a part of what the world is doing, right? I mean, to have electric vehicles, electricity production, derived from wind, solar, clean hydrogen, carbon removal. It's not just a framework for the future environmentally or climate-wise, but economically as well, right?
No question about it. In order to make this transition, the United States as the global leader in just about everything there is in the world, we have to lead. And this bill by the United States Senate and the House really puts us in the number one slot again where we should be. Because if the United States isn't leading, no one will.
Does this keep our climate goals within reach? You had talked about, the bill saying we could reduce our U.S. emissions by about 40% below 2005 levels by 2030. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, that's the key ingredient here. So you have to assess the ability to reduce the carbon intensity of all of our processes that generate carbon dioxide. And this bill will get us to 40% by 2030 reduction in carbon intensity of manufacturing in all sectors of our economy. But the good news here is, in addition to that, the goal has been 50% reduction. You'll recall President Biden set that goal when he came into office. And the analysis shows that we are well within reach of reaching that 50% goal with additional administrative actions at the federal level and the state level. Remember, leaders like California, Washington, Oregon are all significantly addressing carbon intensity issues here as well.
We look at the goal in trying to curb methane emissions. And, we talked about how this is not the Build Back Better plan, Build Back Better Act. But the measure does introduce a fee that would penalize fossil fuel companies for excess methane emissions from drilling oil and gas. Methane is a potent greenhouse gas that's released into the atmosphere when coal, oil, and natural gas are mined and transported, and microbes can also emit methane in low oxygen environments. Emissions of methane have been responsible for about 30% of global warming since pre-industrial times. That's according to the UN Environment Program. So how much will this be able to curb methane emissions? Are these measures to introduce those fees enough? When we know sometimes these big companies, turn their backs or poo-poo regulations already in place, will they try and do the same with this?
Well, this is one of the deals that Mr. Manchin cut, and one of the reasons we have this bill today was the framework that's been put in place for those fossil fuel companies that have methane emission issues. It's both of a carrot and a stick policy. So there's incentives to do the right thing on methane reductions. At the same time, there are impacts if they don't. And so the carrot and stick approach has been found to be very effective in environmental regulations. It allows the companies to solve their own problems and avoid those penalties and provide incentive to do that. So, I think the bill really gets at the heart of how to reduce methane issues.
Let's talk about something else in the bill and something people have heard talked about before this legislation, which is environmental justice.
Yep.
And this climate bill earmarks $60 million for environmental justice initiatives in disadvantaged communities, because there are communities that are disproportionately affected by climate change. We know those tend to be poorer communities. This would include $3 billion in grants to promote clean and accessible transportation, $1 billion for clean buses, garbage trucks, and other heavy-duty vehicles. How do these provisions helping frontline communities deal with this, find and seek environmental justice for these disadvantaged communities?
Well, first of all, it's 60 billion, not million. So it's a huge chunk of money. But on the environmental justice side, where you see concentrations of carbon emissions and other criteria pollutants, not just SOx and NOx and all the stuff that cause cancer and other issues, are all tend to be in areas where there are very large transportation networks, Interstate 5, the New Jersey Turnpike, airports, ports, seaports, marine ports, and guess what? Communities of interest live near those places. And so this money will be focused on addressing emissions of those point sources in those communities that are being disadvantaged by that. And so I think that's an absolutely essential ingredient to addressing the inequity in environmental management that has occurred over the last 30, 40 years.
There are those talking about the bigger picture with this legislation, the message, not that we just get here in the United States, but the important message that this sends to our partners internationally. I mean, experts agree, if implemented, the Inflation Reduction Act would play an important role in signaling to the global community that, hey, the United States is serious about doing its part to fight climate change. And some people say that's a game changer. Do you agree? And if so, why?
Gives the president an amazingly powerful poker hand to play on the global stage with. Now, all of a sudden, the United States put up and put its money where its mouth is for the first time ever on climate change. And so now it's going to force the rest of the world, particularly Europe and Asia and China, I would say particularly, to really react and respond in order to try to keep up or maintain sort of a close second fiddle to where we could end up here. And so it's a big negotiating tool for the president and his team to use the bully pulpit for a change to really force and encourage other countries to get in the game here.
There are very aggressive measures that have been introduced in places like the EU. Like you said, it could spur other countries to act. But because it makes us look like we're catching up to the aggressive climate measures introduced in the EU, now we're not leading from behind anymore. We've taken first place with this, right? Clearly?
Right. We've taken first place. But, you know, the difference between how the U.S. regulates climate and Europe is that Europe favors mandates. So all sticks, no carrots. Whereas the U.S. politicians and U.S. policymakers have really favored this carrot and stick approach because we think there's so much ingenuity out there within the private sector that we might as well, leverage that with both the carrot and the stick. And so the advantage is that, you could easily see the amount of CO2 that's reduced in this bill to be, another 30% greater than it already is today in the analysis. So because of the approach we took on the policy side.
Do you think this will help the president going forward with the more progressive faction of the Democratic Party who've been pushing for climate change legislation for a very long time?
I hope so. I hope they line up and really realize the substantial impact that the success of this bill would have on our climate and the important place in history that this bill really should be placed.
And it also shows you don't have to be just a progressive to believe in climate change and to put legislation like this forth. Joe Biden's clearly a more centrist and moderate Democrat, as I myself am. I hope this is something that can unite us, not just with our world partners, but in this country and certainly within my party, the Democrats.
Well, the progressives are kind of late to the climate change party as far as I'm concerned. So it's glad to have them on board.
And a lot of this legislation I hear the music. We're out of time. We'll have to have you back. I'm very much enjoying talking to you, Tim. Tim Zenk, thank you for being with us, president at Molecule LLC. Please follow him on Twitter @GreenCrude. Thank you, Tim. It's been a pleasure. Have a wonderful afternoon.